The collar at my throat told me I had 11 minutes of charge left, and I was already breathing too hard to trust the number. I went over the ridge instead of around it, boots skidding on wet shale, because going around had cost Joran his 10 minutes an hour before. Somewhere in the bracken behind me a marker drone clicked once, found me, and went quiet again, recording, not warning. They like to let you run a while first. It tested better with the patrons. There were 40 of us taken from Aldermore in one night, herded out of our beds in our school and our one clinic and put on a transport with no markings, and none of us understood what we were for until we woke on Threnody Reach with collars on, and a voice in our ears welcoming us to the long season. The Varen sponsor rate ran it every year, on a rotating world, broadcast to anyone who could afford the feed. The collar gave you 10 minutes grace at each checkpoint and a tracker that told the patrons exactly where you were. The rules, as explained to us in a clean recorded voice, were simple. Reach the eastern marker before your collar died and you were extracted and you lived. It sounded almost fair. I believed it for 2 days. Joran had believed it longer than I did. He went down at the second checkpoint when his collar still showed 6 minutes on the readout, because the checkpoint itself had moved 40 meters east overnight quietly while the feed cut to commercial. I found out from a patron's careless radio chatter, picked up on a salvaged receiver Joran had built from clinic parts before he died. They didn't like the season running too short. Good ratings needed at least half the field to fall, so they moved the lines. They always moved the lines. There had been a teacher among us too, a heavyset man named Aldous Price who'd run the colony's one schoolhouse for 11 years and who organized us, the first night on Threnody Reach, into pairs so that no one would have to run alone. He was the one who worked out by the second day that the collars logged our positions on a 5-second delay and taught 3 of us how to use that delay to break line of sight before a tracker updated. He never used the trick himself. He spent his on doubling back twice for a girl named Petra who twisted her ankle on the scree, and the second time he didn't come back at all. I never saw what took him. I only heard, faint and far off, the sponsor rate's broadcast jingle play the little 3-note sting they used whenever a tag confirmed a kill, and I knew without anyone telling me whose tag it had been. By the 4th day there were 9 of us left out of the 40. And by the time I reached the last ridge it was 6. We had stopped speaking to each other in anything but hand signals by then, not from fear of being heard, but because none of us trusted our own voices not to break. I reached the last ridge before the eastern marker with 4 minutes left on the collar and found the marker gone. Not moved this time, simply gone. The post pulled and the ground swept clean. Because by then only 6 of us were left and 6 was apparently still too many to let finish. I stood there with the wind taking the smoke smell off the lowlands and understood, completely and without panic, that there had never been a marker I could reach. There was only ever the chase, run for as long as the audience wanted it run, ended whenever a patron's tag called it. I heard him before I saw him, a patron in a powered hunting rig, unhurried, narrating into his own private feed in the bored, satisfied voice of a man who has already won. He told his audience my name. He had it from the manifest. He said something about closing out the season strong, and raised the rig's weapon, and I had nothing left to do but stand on the ridge and refuse to run for him, because I was done giving him the part where I ran. The sky changed before he fired. It didn't look like much at first, a seam of white tearing the cloud layer, high and fast, the kind of thing you'd mistake for weather if you hadn't spent 3 days learning to read every change in that sky for what it might cost you. Then there were more seams, dozens, then more than I could count, and the patron's rig swiveled up and away from me, and his private feed, which I would only hear later, recovered from the wreck, went from bored to a single flat curse, and then to nothing at all. The long season's main broadcast cut without warning at 14 hours, 11 minutes into its scheduled run. I know the exact time because it's in the public record now, alongside everything else. One moment the feed was selling commemorative tags for the season's final kill count. The next, the signal simply stopped mid-sentence and was replaced, on every channel the sponsor rate owned, and several it didn't by a single still image of Earth, and a voice that said only, "This hunt is finished, and so is the sponsor rate." I learned the rest later, pieced together from the debrief, and from things I overheard officers say when they thought I was asleep. A relay buoy at the edge of Aldermore's system had caught the abduction transports leaving and held the record for 3 weeks before a passing freighter finally found it adrift and brought it home. Earth didn't send a request for explanation. There was no article anything, no neutral channel, no envoy dispatch to ask the sponsor rate to account for itself. The record went to the War Office on a Tuesday, and by the following Thursday the Hunter's End existed as a standing fleet, built and crewed and underway, because the only question anyone in command had asked was how fast it could be done, not whether it should be. They called it the Hunter's End. 260 ships, assembled in 9 days from the moment Aldermore's silence was confirmed and traced. No warning fired first, no terms transmitted, no window offered for anyone to explain themselves. By the time I understood any of that, I was lying in a gray transport with a foil blanket over me, and a young corpsman checking the collar burn on my neck, telling me in a flat, careful voice that the preserve's perimeter defenses had gone down in under 6 minutes, and that I didn't need to worry about the rigs anymore, that none of the rigs were going anywhere again. I asked her what happened to the patrons. She didn't answer right away, which was its own answer. When she finally spoke, she said only that the fleet hadn't taken prisoners off Threnody Reach, and that the sponsor rate's broadcast license, its assets, its preserve world, and every name on its sponsor manifest were now under permanent seizure, and that this had been decided and executed in the same 9 days it took to build the ships that did it. No tribunal, no appeal window. The long season's own footage, 40 hours of it, recovered intact from their own archive, because the sponsor rate had never imagined anyone would use it against them, was the only evidence anyone needed, and Earth hadn't waited for more. I was the only one of the 6 left on the ridge who walked onto that transport. I want to say, I felt something large when I understood what had been done in our name and on our account, but mostly I remember being cold, and being handed a cup of something hot I couldn't taste, and watching through the transport's small window as the last of the rigs burned on the lowland floor in neat, deliberate fires that didn't spread, because someone had made very sure of that too. They debriefed me for 6 days. I told them about the moved checkpoints, about Joran's radio, about the marker that was never going to be there. A woman from the Compact's War Office sat across from me the whole time, didn't interrupt once, and at the end only asked if I wanted my collar back, salvaged and disarmed as a record for myself. I said yes. I still have it. I keep it where I can see it, not because I need reminding of what they did to us, but because I want to remember exactly how fast the answer came once we stopped being a broadcast and started being counted. The Varen sponsor rate's name is banned from every commercial registry in human space now. Threnody Reach is a quarantine world with a single marker left standing on it. The eastern one, the real one, moved back to where it should have always been and left there as a fact nobody is permitted to argue with again. I was told once, by an officer who'd flown escort on the approach, that the order Earth gave the Hunter's End that day was 4 words long, and that nobody on either side asked for it to be repeated.